All right, guys, I think we're now live for another week of conversations with Commodores with a little twist this week. We've got my longtime friend, Anthony Brown from the Montgomery area on with us from Robert E. Lee High School. Hey, Anthony,
Hi,
thank you
how are
for
you?
joining us this evening.
Hey, it is fantastic to be here. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for having me on tonight.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. And I wanted to kind of mix it up. We've had Cougars on for a few months now, but we have a special history that I thought we could get into a little bit that folks might enjoy reliving a little bit and just hearing from somebody who's not part of the program, but certainly is part of the history of our proud program. So thank you for making some time for us and trekking into enemy territory for about 45 minutes, if you will. But it'll be a friendly enemy territory, I promise. We'll take care of you.
That's fantastic. I was just telling you, Bernard, before we went live, I appreciate you so much for so many reasons, not the least of which is that during this time when there's so much conflict and so much mean-spiritedness on the internet and social media and Facebook in particular, you are one guy that is consistently positive and always working to bring people together. So thank you for letting me be part of that. And I look forward to spending some time with you and your teammates tonight.
Well, that's very kind of you. And I too have seen some of your dance videos, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes as well. For those of you who don't know Anthony or may not remember him, you might have last seen him on the gridiron at Auburn, offensive lineman, paving the way for some of those awesome backs back in the late 80s. And we'll get into some of that in a few minutes. But before that, we met during high school. He was at Robert E. Lee High School, and we had at least 3 games against each other in the mid 80s that were some monumental clashes. And we'll also get into that. But before we jump back and get into the Wayback Machine, Anthony, if you will, tell folks a little bit about yourself professionally and your family and where you live and those kind of things.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. I've been a private wealth advisor for Ronald Blue Trust for the past 20 years. I have an office here in Montgomery, Alabama. I guess in a nutshell, what you could say is I help people make good decisions with their money. I work in a very similar manner to you, and that is on a fee-only basis. I sit together with clients and provide financial planning and help with investments, and it's really a fun and rewarding way to work. From a professional standpoint, really I have two passions in my life. The first is my wife, Julie. She and I have been married for 26, almost 27 years now. We
Awesome.
have 4 beautiful children. Thankfully, they all take after her. And so 2 girls, 2 boys. And now, if I remember correctly, you have 2 girls, right?
I do have 2 girls. I've got one who's a college graduate and one, don't tell anyone, but she's at the University of Georgia. She's a senior undergraduate. And
Well, yeah, there's always one child that goes somewhat astray, right?
That's right. That's right. What's the age range of your 4?
Yeah, well, I've got to tell you this, because just as you were sharing that, it occurs to me that as many scary things as there are for us in business or in the legal profession, or maybe that we've seen on the football field, there is nothing more scary than sending a teenage daughter to college for the first time. And my oldest daughter, Katie, is about to transition to Troy. She wants to study occupational therapy and work with children with special needs, and that is a terrifying thing.
Well, being in Troy, she'll hopefully be driving distance, and just in case mama or daddy wants to look her in the eye or needs to see her. But that's fantastic. Well, guys, back in the day, Anthony was a lot larger than he is now. He was paving the way for some of the very best running backs, like I said, in the SEC. But before that, he got to block for probably the best running back, maybe in Lee history, certainly Montgomery history, and maybe even in the state's history, especially for 6A football. And that was Larry Ware, who was a year behind us. And ultimately, I think he was the 6A player of the year, or maybe Mr. Football. You may remember, Anthony.
He was Mr. Football in 1986. And I've told people for many years that pound for pound, there was never a better athlete that I played with than Larry Ware. And not just physically gifted for his size, but he was a guy that was determined, he was relentless, and he was a person of character and integrity, and has continued to live that way to this day.
And for those who may have lost or not known Larry after college, after high school, he went to the University of Georgia, played for Vince Dooley. And if you'll go back and look at all the running backs who were on campus during the time he was there, and even after he was finished, Rodney Hampton comes to mind. There's so many just incredible backs, and he fit right in there. And that's the number one player that I know that we had to gear up for when we played you guys those couple of years, our junior and senior years, which would have been, you and I are the same age, but Larry was 1 year behind us.
And I'll tell you, as we're talking about Larry and just talking about guys that are pound for pound the best at their position that I've ever seen, I would add Quentin Riggins to that list. Quentin was our linebacker, a senior in 1985, together with me. And Quentin was one of the most phenomenal, gifted, just incredible athletes that I'd ever seen. He was maybe 6 feet tall and 185 pounds, but he was a linebacker that absolutely could not be blocked. In fact, Coach Arrington and Coach Jordan installed a 6-1 defense our junior year. That means we had 6 down linemen. I played defensive line in 1984, and Quentin was the single linebacker. And he did a phenomenal job.
Well, we're going to get to that 6-1 defense in a few minutes, and I do have 2 great stories, personal stories about Quentin. He was a missile. He absolutely, wherever the ball was, he was going to end up being there. But Anthony, let's go back before high school. Did you grow up in Montgomery? Where'd you go to junior high? Did you know you were going to Lee? Did you know you wanted to play football? Share with us a little bit of your background from your childhood and early teen years.
I did. I grew up here in Montgomery. I went to Capitol Heights Junior High School, played junior high football for Coach Andy Davidson, and Larry Ware and I were, in fact, teammates at Capitol Heights. That's where I first met him. And Coach Davidson later followed Coach McCracken over to Lee in 1984, I think was Coach McCracken's first year at Lee. And Coach Davidson, probably more so than most any other coach I've ever met, could light a fire under us and make us believe things like no other. I was just thinking that, I don't remember what year it was, but he was giving us a pep talk, Bernard, and he said, if you think about it, if the atoms in a brick wall aligned just right, together with the atoms in your body, you could physically, literally run through that brick wall. And I know Coach Davidson was not a physicist, and I know that that's not necessarily true, but as a 16, 17-year-old kid, he absolutely had us believing that we could run through a brick wall.
That's a heck of a motivating coach right there.
Oh man, so many great stories of him and Coach McCracken trying to get us motivated to play above our ability.
Now, when we were in 9th grade, we played a 9th grade schedule, but we played it against then our area teams. It was just Ozark, Enterprise, Dothan, and we dipped down into Panama City. I think we either played Mosley or Dolphin. I can't remember. So we didn't play you guys until junior high and high school. JV or varsity level. Now in 9th grade, was Lee a 9th grade school, or were you still at the junior high at that time?
We were still at the junior high. So like you, the junior high in Montgomery ran 7th through 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And so in 9th grade, we played other Montgomery junior high teams like Goodwin and Houston Hills and Carver and people like that. So it really wasn't until 10th grade that we made the transition to Lee.
All right. Well, then let's transition to 10th grade. Did you play any other sports? Had you hit your growth spurt at all? Did you know you were going to the O-line? Where were you in your progress as an athlete?
Probably 10th grade wrestling was maybe my favorite sport. I also played football. I played defensive line and I guess maybe 10th, 11th grade, I was tall and thin, constantly trying to gain weight, trying to lift weight, get bigger, stronger, faster. I think at one point I was on a 6 meal a day plan, working out 6 days a week, and
Awesome.
yeah, doing everything I could. I went from maybe 165 pounds in ninth grade to probably 250, close to 260 by the time I was a senior.
And in the mid 80s, even in 6A ball, that's a big lineman. That's a big lineman. We had linemen, and my blindside tackle just signed on, Chris Lee, who was also our year, number 63. I outweighed Chris our senior year. Now he's my left tackle. I outweighed him by 10 to 12 pounds at quarterback. So if that tells you anything, for 6A, we were all over the board. Obviously, you know Kevin Collins, big guy, 6'5", probably pushing 260 at that time. And then we had my other tackle was about my weight. So Anthony, we were all over the board.
No, Bernard, there is no question. Next to Kevin Collins, you were the second biggest guy on the field.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I bet. I remember Chris. I bet he weighed what, 185 pounds, maybe.
No, maybe Chris, you could chime in, but maybe 175 with 10-pound weight in his back pocket and soaking wet. And he probably weighs within 10 pounds of that right now. Yeah, he says $165 is what he says.
Wow.
But,
how in the world, how can you play offensive line? He played left tackle, right, at 165.
He did, but it's our senior year, that summer, we put in a whole new offense. I proved to be so good at running the wishbone or some variation of that the coaches felt like it was a need if we were going to be successful to switch. So I actually went with our offensive coordinator and our head coach to Atlanta, and we learned the old Houston Gamblers run and shoot. And that was the offense that we put in during this, actually spring and summer. So by the time we played you guys in that first game in the fall of 85, we had only been practicing that maybe 20, 30 practices. We didn't have the thousands of reps. And even though it was just 3 steps and you let the ball go, it's all, all that timing is so critical. And why don't we let's just, before we get to that, I want to talk about leading into your senior year.
Right.
You had a talented quarterback. I think it was John Spencer. You had Quentin on defense. You had so many other guys on both sides of the ball who ended up playing on the next level. But you guys at that time, in my eyes, Prattville, I think, had won the title the year before, if I remember correctly. Berry and Enterprise. I can't remember the whole progress back, but you guys were kind of the gold standard in my eyes, and for many, from Montgomery and South. And back in the day, say again.
I was just going to tell you a quick Prattville story because it's a tie-in to Quentin Riggins, and this is from the 1984 season. Prattville was undefeated. Mm-hmm. They went on and won the state championship that year. We're playing them in Prattville. Quentin is our one linebacker. We've got 6 down linemen. I'm playing left tackle on defense. We're getting pushed around. We're actually ahead with about a minute to go in the fourth quarter. Prattville's driving down the field, and Kenneth Appling and Kennedy Mitchell and Brad Armagost and I mean, all of us, we were getting knocked around. Coach Arrington, who was our defensive line coach, he pulled us aside and he said, "Guys, you have forgotten what your job is." And of course, we're looking at him and we're thinking about making tackles and pressuring the quarterback and keeping containment. And he said, "No, your job is to keep anybody from hitting Quentin Riggins. Quentin's job is to make every tackle." And so our only job was to protect Quentin so that he could make the tackles. We stopped him right on the goal line just as time ran out. That was the only game that Prattville lost in that 1984 season. And we barely made it back to the buses because the students were upset. They were angry. They were throwing things. Coach McCracken had us keep our helmets on as they were kind of rocking the buses. And we got out of there as fast as we could and sang all the way back to Ann Street and Robert E. Lee High School.
Awesome. Well, in a minute, I'm going to share with you a similar story when we played Opelika at Opelika. playoffs.
Yeah.
But leading into that season, you guys had so much talent, so much momentum, and really set the bar very high. And y'all were our first game of the year. So our prep leading into the season and that fall was the league game. You know, it's the first game of the year. It's the game where we've got to set the tone. And I want, from your perspective, talk to us about your prep work going into your senior year. Did you have any inkling at that time that you really wanted to play on the next level? Was that pushed aside as the season began, or was that part of everyday conversations? Take us into your world leading into that, say, August of 85, going into both of our senior years.
Yeah, I think that was a special summer for us. Coach McCracken had come in the year before, and he really stressed this idea of family and playing together. He, like probably no other coach I've ever been around in my life, had us believing in God and mom and apple pie and Robert E. Lee High School. And that summer, we loved each other. We trained together. We hung out together outside of practice. There were a handful of us on the offensive line. Kerry Jackson, Big C, Jeff Dorman, Nathan Stevens, Kenneth Dawkins, Jimmy Selma. I mean, so many guys that came together that summer and worked out. And probably you guys were doing the same thing with Coach Parrish, where we had voluntary workouts, but everybody was there every day. There was just something different from a chemistry standpoint, from a relational standpoint, working out, running, trying to eat and gain strength and maintain speed and agility and flexibility and those kinds of things. But here's something interesting, and I don't think you know this, but the day of football practice, the day that formal practice began, this was probably the first week of August of 85, and we were running, we were going to run like a 40-yard sprint and max out in the weight room and things like that. And I'm get up early that morning, I'm taking a shower, I knock a shower bottle off the little shelf in the shower. It falls and lands square in the center of my foot. And it hurts like crazy. I mean, it is a sharp pain. And I just think, oh no, what has happened? And you know, eventually it gets better. And I go to practice and we line up to do our 40-yard sprint. And, you know, as an offensive lineman, you know, we don't necessarily have to be lightning fast, but actually I play defensive line then. You don't have to be lightning fast, but you want to be somewhere around 5'1", 5'2", 5'3", maybe in that range. And I ran my first sprint and I came in like at 5'6" or 5'7", and I felt like an ice pick was just being jammed right into the top of my foot. And so Coach Perry, our offensive line coach, told me to line up and run it again. And the next time I ran like a 5'9" or a 5'10", even slower. I was limping. Ended up having an MRI later that afternoon, and the orthopedist came in. He sat down with my dad and me, and he said, "Mr. Brown, I think we need to put a cast on your son and maybe shoot for 6 to 8 weeks, and then do another MRI and maybe, you know, be in a position where he can play later this season." And of course, my dad scratched his head and he thought about it a little bit. He looked at me and looked at the doctor and he said, "Yeah, or we could put him in a boot for 2 weeks, give him some pain medicine, and be ready for the Northview game." So that was the decision. And that very afternoon, I was back at practice on a bicycle with a helmet and shoulder pads on, riding laps around and around the field as the rest of the team started preparation for that season. So it was a significant, significant setback and challenge to the start of my senior year.
Oh, I bet your mindset. You bet you were all over the place. Did it ever heal throughout the season?
Oh man, it was constant pain. But here's something interesting. I would be curious to get your take on this, because I know you're a person of faith, but sometimes the greatest blessings in life come from situations that we would have never chosen for ourselves, that we would have never expected, that we would have never wanted, and yet ultimate good comes of it. Because when I came back to practice after 2 weeks on the bicycle, I still wasn't mobile. I still wasn't quick. I couldn't play defensive line the way that I had the year before. A young guy named Richard Gilchrist had taken my position. He was a better player than me. Kennedy Mitchell was better. Brad Armagost, Kenneth Appling. I had no position remaining, and so I'm standing there, and thankfully, Coach Jimmy Perry, our offensive line coach, said, "Brown, why don't you come over here? We need an offensive tackle." And I thought, oh no, I don't want to play offensive tackle. But I'm so thankful for that opportunity, because as it turned out, that gave me the opportunity to play a position that I really hadn't played in a long time. And as it turned out, more offensive tackles were being recruited that particular year. So I had more opportunities to meet coaches and opportunities that I never would have otherwise had.
You know, it would have been very easy as an athlete going into your senior year to just fold it in, or to not pivot and just say, no, I'm a defensive lineman. I'm going to stay right here and I'm going to fight for my job again. But no, that shows a lot of character on your part as a team player and a team leader to step up to that. So and look what it did for you. Ultimately, you got recruited and played in the SEC and had some success there as well. So that is very interesting. And what I wanted to ask you, Anthony, is you have wrestling in your background. How did any of the wrestling training help you at all for playing either D-line or offensive line? Did it do anything for your footwork or your hands or maybe your mind?
Yeah, probably all of the above. In addition, just flexibility. Wrestling requires a significant amount of flexibility. I remember we were playing Tennessee one year. It might have been my junior year. Somebody rolled into my knee, and I don't know if you ever wore these plastic and metal knee braces, but all the linemen wore them back in the 80s, and they were really strong, solid, brittle type steel design with plastic and coverings that attach to your thigh and calf. And as someone rolled into my knee, it literally snapped the metal in half. The metal broke and the plastic came apart. And I looked down and I thought, oh my goodness, what has happened to my knee? And I stood up and I was fine. But part of the reason was from years of wrestling, and in high school I was involved for a period in martial arts as well, where we did significant stretching and flexibility type stuff. And I was very thankful for that, because, looking back, I was one of very few offensive linemen at Auburn that did not have knee surgery over the course of that period from 86 through 89.
You were, I'm sure, one of the minority in that department for probably across the SEC, if not college football. But I bet your muscle memory, just all of that training with martial arts, you don't even think about it. You just do it. And it probably puts you in better positions to not be in vulnerable spots where somebody rolled up on you and injured you. But let's go back to that senior year. And you're leading up, we're leading up to our game, which was supposed to be on a Friday night before Labor Day weekend. But we all know the hurricane came through. And not only did it push it from Friday to Saturday, but then it pushed it from Saturday to Monday afternoon. We kicked off at like 1 or 1:15 in the afternoon in Houston County in September. Holy smokes, it was muggy, it was humid. And for a lineman, I'm sure that was not where you wanted to be, that type of temperature. But take us into the bus ride down, or whatever you remember. We're so old now. It's been ages.
Hey man, it's only been 35 years, right?
That's right. That's right.
Now, the thing I remember most is exactly what you said, is that it rained absolutely nonstop the several days leading up to that game. It must have rained all weekend long. We came down on the bus, we got off, it was 90 degrees, absolute 100% humidity, and just awful conditions. The field was still wet, as I recall, and I don't know if it was a result of the rain or if this is just kind of standard, ordinary conditions for you guys, but we had these gnats that were as big as horseflies, and they were everywhere. And not just, aggravating, but I mean, these biting gnats. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what in the world have we gotten into down here in Dothan, Alabama?
Yeah, we strategically release those before each home game into the anyway. That what you may not know is Anthony, after that game, and I'm not going to gloss over the game, but after that game, we ended up playing 3 games in a 10-day span. We played Monday against y'all, then we played against City Lanier, and then we played, oh heavens, maybe Kendrick. I can't remember the third game, but it was 3 games in 10 days.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was crazy, but we just kept having rainouts and games get pushed and things, nothing you could control. But
well, it was so hot and the conditions were so brutal. And I mean, there was hardly anybody there. I mean, no one came down from Montgomery except maybe a handful of parents.
Mhm.
And it was, again, the humidity was just terrible. I remember one of our players, and it was either our nose guard or it might have been our center, Nathan Stevens, but had some kind of heat reaction, and he was vomiting. And this was before the game even started. And just the vomit and saliva was on the football. And of course, Larry Ware was yelling at John Spencer to wipe the ball. And and Chris Porter and Clay Kaufman are ends and fullback, and everybody's complaining, and just absolute total disarray.
well,
And, it was just absolutely a crazy way to start the season.
well,
Bernard, I think I lost you.
it was because the third, yeah, my Wi-Fi's got to catch up. Give it just a second. All right, sometimes it goes out. I can't control it. But the third offensive play of the game for us, Lawrence Dawsey breaks his arm. He gets hit with a helmet going down, and so our main offensive player, he's done. So our offensive attack going in is we were not going to rely as much on the passing part of the run and shoot because our timing was still off. We were going to run the ball and do some short throws. But after 3 plays, Lawrence is out, and his replacement, O'Shawn Legree, was a sophomore who I don't think had ever touched the ball in a varsity game. Talented guy. Could run. I think he may have been the second fastest guy on the team. But he's nervous. He's nervous. So if I remember, I think I ended up throwing the ball about 30 times that game.
Yeah.
I had a couple of, and we had a couple of long touchdowns that were called. Our defensive players, and ultimately, by the time that season ended, we had several guys on defense who ended up signing scholarships that year or the next year, but they just had not gelled. And when you've got a back like Larry who can just attack the hole and you guys are opening up such big holes, that was a tough day for us. So y'all ended up winning 14-8 in a game that we truly thought that we should have won or could have won, despite Lawrence breaking his arm, these touchdowns getting called back, Larry Ware doing his thing. But y'all came away with that victory to set the stage for the first part of the season.
Yeah, Coach McCracken and Coach Perry had an offensive philosophy that was certainly run first. And we had a play, I think it was just power I right, 24 power. And Larry Ware would run between Kerry Jackson and me at right guard and tackle, and Nathan Stevens playing center. And basically, if Larry gained 3 yards, we would run it again. Because Coach Perry's philosophy was, as long as you're picking up 3 or 4 yards and they can't stop you, we'll just keep running the same play. So, Larry, he might have 300 yards in a game.
The younger crowd have all seen Zeke Elliott for the Cowboys doing this. Keep eating. I swear that could have been Larry Ware back in the day. Just keep feeding me the ball.
Yeah.
You guys opening up such big holes, but that set the stage for you guys. I want to say, take us through the first part of the season for you all, because we didn't meet again for about 2 more months in the third round of the playoffs.
Yeah, so we got off to a 6-0 start. We were riding high. We were playing really well. I think we gelled together as a team. We were having fun. We were working hard, and we were getting ready for homecoming. And Dothan High School came to Montgomery to play us for homecoming. We had a lot of older alumni in. A great week of practice. Everything was set up for a beautiful homecoming, and Dothan absolutely torpedoed everything we were doing. And for the life of me, I cannot explain it. But as I recall, did Dothan beat Northview in '85 as well?
They did at the end of the season, and it was in overtime. We had 5 overtimes that year, but Scotty Dees kicked a field goal to beat us. But they had such talent on their side of I always equated Dennis Tillman was their main running back. And I always thought he was very much like Larry Ware, just without the publicity and the notoriety. But yeah, they were a very talented team. And what they ended up doing, Anthony, is because they beat us, they were the area champs. So they played Central of Phoenix City in the first round at home with James Joseph, who you know very well. But Bo Peep got hurt in that game. So we didn't have to face him in the next round. The things just kind of, as we get to toward the playoffs, things just kind of fell in our way throughout those 5 or 6 weeks. But you guys played Dothan High for homecoming and then keep taking us through the end of the regular season.
Yeah, the last thing I remember about the Dothan High game, by the way, and this kind of ties back into our conversation about your left tackle, Chris, that we were talking earlier. Dothan High had a defensive tackle that lined up across from me that I bet weighed 165 pounds. And he was small, but he was the fastest guy I played against in high school. I wish I could remember his name because I never laid a hand on him the whole night. By the time I got to where he was somewhere else. And
well, we've got a bunch of people watching right now, so maybe somebody will come up with who it is. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Oh man, yeah. I wonder if your tackle remembers that.
Dewey, another one of my linemen, Josh Parrish, got a whole bunch of folks who are on here. Actually, Kevin Collins' brother Stephen.
Yeah,
watching us right now. So thanks for tuning in, Stephen.
Right.
So keep going through the Dothan High to the end of the season.
Yeah, well, we kind of got back up on our feet. We played well through the end of the year. We played our crosstown rival, Jeff Davis. We were in a position to win that game, and then missed extra point late and ended up losing, I think, by a point, which was frustrating. But the neat thing about that is just the way the schedule played out. We ended up playing them in either the first or second round of the playoffs that year and came back and were able to beat them in Crampton Bowl and kind of revenge that loss. And that was actually the first time we had beat Jeff Davis in my 3 years at Lee. So yeah, similar to the rivalry, I guess, between Northview and Dothan, the Lee JD rivalry was certainly intense, in the 80s. And so heading into the Northview game, we really felt good. We felt confident.
You were probably ranked either second or third in the state at that point. I can't remember, but after that first game against you guys, we ended up losing 3 of our first 4 games. In our homecoming game against Central of Thomasville out of Georgia, Lawrence came back, we turned it around, and then we ended up winning the rest of the season out until we got to Dothan High. The Dothan High, as I said, the Dothan High game was actually a blessing that we lost. But we played Opelika in the opening round. They were 10-0. They were number 1 in the state. And we won the game very late, touchdown to Hogan, I believe, very late. So we upset them. We were 6-4. We were the last 6A team in the playoffs. Out of the 32 teams or whatever it was, we were ranked last. So we went to Opelika. Well, after the game, one of our students, not a ball player, but one of the students who had traveled up from Dothan, gets into an altercation with an Opelika student and gets stabbed. It was pretty serious. He lived, he came back, he was fine afterward, but I guess frustrations just spilled out. But that bus ride out of town, leaving from the stadium, from the clubhouse, out of the stadium, helmets on, we're getting yelled at, things are being thrown at the bus. It was similar to what you're talking about, your experience.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, Opelika is an intense place. They take football serious to this day.
Well, we had, like I said, we beat Opelika. Then we took in the second round, we hosted Central Phoenix City. Why they had to come to Dothan twice in 2 weeks, I don't know. But Bo Peep was on the sidelines and we ended up shutting them out. All they had really was, what's the quarterback's name? Can't think of it, but they just didn't have much of an offense without him flying around. And then that leads us coming to Crampton Bowl for the third round of the playoffs. And frankly, until the middle of the fourth quarter, it was going y'all's way the whole way. It was 27-10. Y'all were having your way. Larry was doing his thing. Your defense was really having a field day because I couldn't do much. And take us to that game. Take us to what you remember leading up to the game. You know, it's the semifinals. Then the fourth round is the game before the state championship game. I know y'all weren't overlooking us at all because we were a known opponent. But what do you remember from that time period?
Yeah, the biggest thing about that night was just the electric atmosphere in Crampton Bowl. I mean, our side of the stands were full. You guys brought a ton of students and parents and fans together with you. A lot of people from Montgomery, from other high schools were there. I'm not sure what the capacity is at Crampton Bowl, but it was about as full as I've ever seen it. And I remember the drum corps playing down in the end zone while we were warming up and stretching, and just the drum beat being as loud as it was, and you could just feel the percussion, against your chest as we were stretching before that game. And we came out, and it's been a while since I've seen that game. I have it on a VHS cassette, but I don't know about you, but I haven't had a VCR that works probably in the last 20 years. So at some point, I'm going to get that VHS cassette converted to DVD.
Well, I can save you the trouble. I've loaded the game onto YouTube, and I can send you the link if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please do. I would love to see it because, as you mentioned, up until, as I recall, there was probably right at maybe 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. We were ahead 27-10. Coach McCracken had a great deal of respect for Coach Parrish. He pulled us out because he didn't want to run up the score, and he wanted to show respect, certainly to Coach Parrish and you guys and everything you had done that season. So I remember the guard that played, the guard that played opposite side of me, Jeff Dorman, and I, we pulled our helmets and shoulder pads off. We put our jersey on over our undershirt. We had Gatorade, and we went over and we found our parents in the stand, and we're waving. I mean, the Leafs, we're celebrating.
Yeah, well, you had no reason not to at that point. 3 touchdowns with 10 minutes to go. I get it.
Man.
Anthony,
yeah, well, we learned a very valuable lesson when you and Lawrence Dawsey and was it Chris Holmes that caught a pass?
It was David Hogan and Chris Holmes were the 2 receivers, but Hogan is the one who caught the passes.
Oh my goodness, it was phenomenal. I mean, you hear people talk about chemistry and you hear people talk about momentum shifts. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, an 18-point turnaround in less than 10 minutes when, at least up until that point, certainly everything had gone our way. And I mean, we were letting the second and third string guys play. And I think that was a valuable lesson for us as a football team. And that's a valuable lesson in life, for that matter.
Well, Anthony, I'll tell you, we've had many friends, classmates, and even family members who said that they had already left Montgomery and were headed back. And were listening on the radio when this started and came back to Montgomery. So they thinking they could get in for the last couple of minutes. But what I can tell you, and we've relived this, of course, a bunch amongst ourselves, is that we got the ball back somewhere around the 32, 33 yard line with about 10 and a half minutes to go. And we're in the huddle. We had been through 4 overtimes already that year. We had not really blown out any team. We had not been blown out by any team. And it would be easy for me to sit here and tell you, oh, we were cool, calm, and collected. But I will say this, it was very businesslike. The only thing that broke the tension, and this is an absolutely true story, is Chris Lee, the guy we were talking about a few minutes ago. In the huddle, I'm about to call the play, and he says, you know, we got him right where we want him. And it really just broke some tension.
Yeah.
Smile.
Absolutely.
You know, 2 plays later, I found Hogan in a seam, and he took it 60-odd yards, and that's what started it. But here's my 2 stories about Quentin.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is really more about the defensive coaches or Coach McCracken. Mm-hmm. You guys never changed defense the whole 4th quarter.
We only had one.
You stayed in that 6-man line with 1 linebacker, and I'm thinking my brother David, who's now my business partner and in his mid-40s, but at the time was in 5th grade. I'm thinking, if they're going to run that defense, and we've been practicing this offense all year, why can't we hit those? And so it didn't take very long, and I just was always surprised you guys never changed up something.
Right.
But it was what it was. But that was the first thing, was Quentin's head on a spin. It was something, because he, you know, when he's only 10 feet right in front of me and I'm looking him right in the eyes, and I know what he wants and needs to do, but I know I don't need him to do that. But that was the first part. The second part, this was comical. If you may remember, after we scored the 3rd touchdown, we go for 2. Mm-hmm. And the ball gets tipped. I throw it in the flats. Quentin, I think it was, pretty sure it was Quentin, intercepts it.
It was. Right in
front of me. And I walked off the sidelines. He walks right past me, and I know that you can't return that ball for anything. It's a dead play. So I let him go. I could have easily, you know, pulled him or tripped him or something. Mm-hmm. So he flies right by me. Well, out of nowhere comes David Hogan from the other side of the field. And you remember this. He chases him the entire length and ultimately tackles him inside the 5. And I think you guys were penalized for delay of game.
Oh, I was about to say that you were penalized. I thought the penalty was on Northview for tackling him.
No, you ran it back. But the game's not over. There's still a minute plus to go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You guys get the ball back. You take us into that huddle, because we're still on the edge of our seats with a minute to go, and y'all have the ball and you're driving.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember much about that last drive, except that, as I recall, we completed a pass that would have taken us down maybe to the Northview, 25 or something?
Or deeper. It was like a flea flicker.
Okay, yeah. So we're down by a point. All we need is to kick a field goal. We complete the pass. We still have time, and I don't remember who caught that pass, but somehow he fumbled the ball, and you guys recovered it right there.
That's right.
In the red zone, right?
I think it was a double pass.
Yeah.
Maybe Spencer to one of your receivers, or a back who threw it to your receiver. But Mike Henry, number 13, who's now the head basketball coach at Carroll and a longtime prep basketball coach in the Wiregrass area, Mike knocked the ball loose and recovered it.
Wow. I mean, that's just so characteristic of your entire year. They didn't call you guys the cardiac kids for nothing, right?
That's right. That's right. And you know, that game, in all candor, that game is what put a bunch of our players on the map from a recruiting standpoint. We had been building momentum, but nobody, nothing like that game.
Hey, I've got a bit of trivia from that game for you.
Go ahead.
So earlier today, I found the article in the Montgomery Advertiser that was written on that Saturday, I guess, after we played that game on that Friday night. Here's the trivia. Between you and John Spencer, who had the better completion percentage that night?
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Here's the problem, though. You, as I recall, you were 23 of 35 okay, for like 400 yards. And John Spencer was 2 of 3.
Well,
we literally threw the ball 3 times.
yeah. Well, between Larry and maybe the fullback, y'all probably had 200 and some odd yards rushing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, we had over, I think we had over 300 yards on the ground.
It wouldn't surprise me. But
Okay, so
not,
real quick, here's the other bit of trivia, and I'm sure you remember this. Who was the punter? When you guys started on that very first series, you were 3 and out, and who punted that ball?
oh, that was me.
Right.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it Patrick? Who ran it back?
Yeah. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name, but he ran it back, what, 50 or 60 yards for a touchdown. Okay, so here's the trivia, though. We missed the extra point. Who made the attempt for that extra point?
I'm going to guess it was you. I don't know.
No, it was Quentin Riggins.
Really?
How great is that?
That's
I mean, we would not have even been in the game if it were not for Quentin. I mean, Quentin did 99 things for every one thing that he might have done wrong, but he together with Dennis Drew, we had 2 kickers on the team, and at the time, Quentin was kicking field goals better than Dennis. And so Quentin came in and somehow, and again, I would love to see the video, he missed that extra point. And if it wasn't for that, we would have perhaps gone into overtime, and you guys would have had a chance to pull out another overtime win that night.
Yeah, well, let's take us. I hate to rub salt in the wound, but I've got you here. We got about 5 more minutes. Take us into the clubhouse after that game.
Okay, I have told people for years in my entire life playing football, and I started in 2nd or 3rd grade, and of course played all through college. There's one game that I have cried after, and that was the Northview game, and it wasn't just me. I mean, we balled, and I mean we laid it on the field. We played our hearts out, but at the same time, the way things ended and the shift in momentum, it's hard not to second guess what we did or what we didn't do, or things we might have done differently. And I mean, it's just a absolute stunning end to our season. And so you guys, as high as you were and as great a celebration as it was, and I remember the party you guys had right in the middle of our field after that game, and just imagine the elation that you were feeling. And we were absolutely on the opposite end, on the opposite end of that spectrum. And it was a gut punch like no other.
Well, I'll tell you from my memory, and Coach Randy Hicks, one of our defensive coaches, I think is still watching. Our coaching staff was not happy about our celebration on the field. They were not happy about us showing up anybody in their place. It was all about showing some respect, some class. Now, we could celebrate in the clubhouse and under the stadium all we wanted, but not right there. And I remember the coaches just were not happy about that, and some choice words were had. Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this, and this just kind of ties into how football relates to life. And I've often thought about this, and we all come from different faith backgrounds or traditions or beliefs or denominations or whatever, but most all of us that are believers can agree on at least 2 things about God, and that is that he is all-knowing and he is all-powerful. And if we agree that God is omniscient and omnipotent, then we have confidence that everything that happens in this life happens for a reason. There's nothing wasted. There's nothing meaningless. And our tears that we cried that night were not in vain, but there is purpose in it, and there's ultimate good that comes from it. And I think we all learned so much from the way that game unfolded. And even now, 35 years later, there are times that I'm sure you're doing something from a legal standpoint, or I'm doing something with my family or in the office with business. And regardless of what the feeling is or where we are in terms of feeling like we're accomplishing something or we're falling behind, we are never at a loss until that final whistle blows. And no matter how far ahead we might feel like, the tendency to want to coast, there's always that risk that it's going to cost us in the end. And just that attitude and perspective that football as a microcosm of life can teach us about never quitting, never giving up, and fighting to the very end. You guys were characteristic and emblematic of that, and you lived it out for an entire season. And I hate that we had to experience it the way that we did, but there's every bit as much good that came from it for us at Lee as it was good that came of it for you guys at Northview. So, man, what a great opportunity to be part of something special.
You know, you're so right. There are so many lessons for the side that won and the side that did not win. But it's not, at that time, that meant the world to both sides. But we went on from there. You ended up with a scholarship to Auburn. One of my teammates, Kevin Collins, was in the same signing class with you. I'm sure you guys talked about it, I don't know, maybe 30 or 50 times at the time. But what
Kevin and I were roommates. We were roommates at Auburn. We had the program from that game hanging in our dorm room. So we talked about it.
Oh, boy, that's not right. That's not right. But Anthony, we've got a couple more minutes, but I don't want to get away from now it's a funny story, I hope. But you and I ended up taking a recruiting visit together to Nashville, to Vanderbilt. And I remember driving up to Montgomery. This was in January of '86, our senior year. And you and I, did we fly out of Montgomery or did we fly out of Birmingham? I can't remember that part.
We flew out of Montgomery, as I recall.
Well, one thing I do recall is that we had a storm and on the way up there. So I'm going to let you take it over from there.
No, what comes to mind for me is that if I was not a person of faith before I stepped on that airplane, I certainly was within a few minutes, because as I recall, we flew directly into a thunderstorm, and I don't remember exactly how large that plane was, but it was by far the smallest plane I'd ever seen, and that was the first time I'd ever even been on an airplane. I didn't know they flew planes that small out of an airport.
I just remember sitting next to you, and you had to have been, at the time, were you 6'5" and about 260? I don't remember, but I was not quite your size. But I just remember sitting next to you and just feeling the tension that you were feeling, because it was not an easy flight whatsoever. It's in the wintertime. We're going up to Nashville. We hit a rainstorm or something, and the plane is doing this. But we landed. We were fine. I don't remember tons about the trip. I remember it was fun. I remember being offered while I was there, telling Coach Brown that I would call him when I got home after I talked to my parents. You know, those usual things of a trip. But clearly Auburn was where your heart was. And before we get out of here, I want you to share, you know, what was it about being at Robert E. Lee? What was it about Coach McCracken or your line coach or even your martial arts background that helped prepare you being able to play line in the SEC, which you did quite admirably?
I think it was just the perspective of hard work and overcoming challenge. You know, there's so many things that happened over the course of a season. There were so many things that happened that summer leading up to my senior year, including the stress fracture that most likely could have easily ended not just my senior season, but any opportunity that I might have otherwise had to play beyond high school. But being around guys, you know, like Larry Ware and like Quentin Riggins and so many others, guys that were not necessarily just the most naturally gifted guys, but worked hard and were committed to do the right things the right way and to focus on the process and to do that over a long period of time. That's the key to success in most anything, whether it's family or marriage or children or business or law. It's not necessarily to focus on the goal so much as it is to focus on what am I doing today? What am I doing right now to move just a little bit closer to whatever that ultimate goal is? And am I focused on the process? And I think that's what I learned from guys like Coach McCracken and Coach Arrington and Coach Perry and Davidson and so many others. So man, I mean, like you and Coach Parrish, and I mean, all the guys that poured into us and invested into us, the time and energy certainly is paying dividends, I know, in our families now.
Well, Anthony, the last thing I wanted to share for those of you who don't know, don't feel sorry for Lee High School football program because the next year they went 15-0. Not only were they state champs, but in some polls they were the national champs that year. Larry Ware ran for more yards, I think, than any back. Ended up going to Georgia and had a successful career there. So Lee got theirs, albeit 1 year later.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernard, do I have time to tell a Kevin Collins story?
Oh, please do. If you have two of them, please.
Yeah, so Kevin Collins and I were visiting Georgia Tech, and Coach Curry was by far the most impressive coach I think we had ever visited with. Kevin's dad and my dad loved Coach Curry, and so my dad and I are in Coach Curry's office, and my dad says to Coach Curry, "Hey, the rumor is that you've had a lot of success at Tech, and if you have a successful year this year, you may move on." And Coach Curry looked at us and he said, "Mr. Brown, you can count on me. I am committed to Tech. I'm a Georgia Tech man. I'm going to be here for the rest of my career, and I'm committed to you." And so I looked at Coach Curry and I said, "Coach Curry, I am committed to you. I want to be a Georgia Tech man, and you can count on me." And so, of course, we left that meeting. Kevin and I decided we were going to play football together at Georgia Tech. We were going to be roommates. We get to the day before signing day. Okay, this is the day before. My dad comes in my room late that night, and he said, "Son, I really think that you'd be happier at Auburn. I think that's probably where you need to be." And I said, "Dad, I think you're right. It's a family atmosphere. Coach Dye and the whole staff there is just a different feeling than what we had at Georgia Tech in Atlanta." And at that point, I'm 18 years old, so I don't know really how to make that kind of decision. So Dad said, "Why don't you call Kevin, see what he and his dad are talking about?" I called Kevin. It turned out he and his dad had the same conversation. And I said, "Well, Kevin, so you want to be roommates at Auburn?" And he was like, "Absolutely." And so the next morning, we made phone calls to Coach Curry, and Coach Curry said, "Now, son, I thought you were a man of your word." And I said, "I'm sorry, Coach. My dad and I talked." And anyway, so Kevin and I commit to Auburn. End up playing at Auburn. Years later, I sat together with Coach Curry at a dinner, and I said, "Coach, you remember that day in your office when you committed to me that you were going to be at Georgia Tech, and I committed to you, and then a year later I'm at Auburn, and 2 or 3 years later, I can't remember, he ends up at Alabama." So you never know.
Right.
You never know how crazy these recruiting and coaches.
I think maybe 88 was his first season at Alabama. So it wasn't that much longer.
Yeah, well, yeah, going into of course, 89, when we played them in Auburn, Alabama was undefeated. They came into Jordan-Hare Stadium 10-0, and absolute scariest day of my life. I was playing left tackle, trying to protect Reggie Slack from Keith McCants. Keith was an All-American guy, just phenomenal athlete, and I was a very average guy playing over my head. But thankfully, we played well. We had a good scheme against their defense and ended up winning that game. But
I was going to say, who won that game? Just look at the scoreboard.
Yeah, well, real quick, that's, Kevin and I were, of course, recruited at Auburn. So I was at the 85 Iron Bowl. That's when Van Tiffen kicked the field goal right at the very end. In the post-game locker room, Coach Dice, he thanked the seniors for all their work. And he said, now you underclassmen, I'm going to commit to you that we're going to turn it up a notch. And we're going to work our tails off. And we're never going to be put in a position where, we trail off at the end, and we're not going to be outworked by anybody. So Kevin and I decided to go to summer school that particular summer. We came in the first part of June, and they had a summer conditioning program where we were, as offensive linemen, we were running 346-yard sprints, which is absolutely ridiculous for an offensive lineman to run that far. But we were running and working out 6 days a week. That August, when practice started, when the upperclassmen came in, Coach Dye implemented a 4-a-day practice schedule. And Kevin had 2 alarm clocks that he brought from home. I brought 2 from home. We set all 4 for 4:45 every morning. And we were on the field by 6. Practice, we had breakfast. Kevin and I went to class. Kevin was off the charts and still is off the charts smart, straight A student, good ACT. And Coach Waters in the athletic department put us in an honors program. So we were doing calculus and chemistry and all this stuff. And then we would come back, go to lunch. We would have special team drills before lunch, team meetings. We'd have practice in the afternoon. We'd have supper, and then we'd go over to the baseball field and run through plays until 9 o'clock at night. And it was absolutely intense. But like you pointed out, though, from 86 to 89, we did beat Alabama 4 years in a row. We won 3 SEC championships, and that was the best time of Coach Dye's career at Auburn. So
Absolutely.
really,
Do you still cringe at 4:45 a.m.? No, I would. Anthony, I could keep talking to you forever, bud, but I've got to scoot for now. And I sure appreciate your time, your stories, and sharing your experiences with us on Conversations with Cougars.
Hey, thank you, Bernard. This was great, man. I appreciate you, and thank you for letting me participate.
Absolutely. Guys, this will conclude another awesome conversation. Each Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central, we come to you. Just look on the Facebook page. I can't remember who's next. Maybe Coach Ragsdale may be next. But y'all have a good evening, and please use common sense. Wear your mask. We're going to get through this pandemic. We just got to remain patient. That's right. Have a good night, guys.